I watched the whole press conference, and he literally does condemn the white nationalists and neo-Nazis.
Very fine people on both sides. And I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white nationalists, because they should be condemned totally.
My mind went like, it exploded, because, you know, for years I've been fed like Donald Trump, white nationalist. Donald Trump is dog whistling to the neo-Nazis, and he's saying that they're very fine people. It's literally not true. Hello everyone, my name is Amanda, and this video is going to be part of a series of videos I'm making about how and why I changed my mind about Donald Trump and why he is not literally Hitler. Okay, this one I think is honestly the most important. So this is about the Charlottesville. There are very fine people on both sides comment. Okay, because that has been circulating for years, and I think that's the basis for a lot of this, like Donald Trump is a white nationalist, Donald Trump is a neo-Nazi, Donald Trump is dog whistling. So I think this is like this concept, this idea that Donald Trump said there's very fine people on both sides with the Charlottesville rally. I think this is the most important one about my misconceptions about Donald Trump. There's a statue of General Lee in Charlottesville, and Lee is a Confederate, right? So he was leading the Confederate Army, the pro-slavery army during the Civil War. So there's a statue of Robert E. Lee. There were two competing groups about the statue. One who was saying that the statue should not come down. The other was saying that the statue should come down. A reasonable debate to have, okay? From those two sides, you then had literal neo-Nazis with like tiki torches showing up to support the Robert E. Lee statue staying up. And you also had Antifa showing up to support tearing down the statue of Robert E. Lee. This is in August of 2017. So far before now, when we see people actually tearing down statues, right? But this was happening back then in 2017. So you basically had like two kind of groups on each side of the debate. You had you had the actual people who wanted to debate the idea of, or who wanted to protest the idea of, keep the statue, don't keep the statue. Then you had crazy neo-Nazi garbage people, and you had Antifa, Black Bloc, also crazy people, okay? That's how I personally understand what happened in Charlottesville, all right? And Trump went on the record, and the quote is, quote, "There are very fine people on both sides," right? So it's like he was condoning what white nationalists were doing, is what all the papers said, right? That's what all the news said. Like, oh my God, Trump doesn't condemn white nationalists. And that's literally not true, which blew me away. Then I heard him actually say the quote, "I am not talking about the neo-Nazis and white nationalists. They should be condemned totally." And he said that in the same damn press conference. My mind glitched. Like, how is it that that part of the sentence, that part of the press conference wasn't fully covered? I don't understand. Why wasn't it shown that he was saying they should be condemned totally? Why wasn't that shown? I don't know. Okay, right? So when I say the media has covered this, right? I even mean now, today, as of August 8th, 2020. Okay, so if you just go to Google and you type in very fine people, okay, this is what pops up in the news section. Okay, this is page 1 of Google's responses, and this is page 2 of Google's responses. If you just type in very fine people, and literally every single story is a negative story about Donald Trump. It's a misframing of what he has said in this 2017 press conference. And all of these lies are still being said today, right? As of, again, August 8th, 2020, 1 day ago, 7 hours ago, 18 hours ago. This is all current, okay? Trump's shame is the first story. What in the blank? Right down here, Trump is a racist. Trump sneered at the Civil Rights Act. We know why. His comment about very fine people at violent rallies in Charlottesville, Virginia. Okay? Which is not real. He condemned white nationalists. It doesn't make any sense to me. It's so bizarre. My all-time favorite is all the way down here, right, at Vox. What is white nationalism? Take a look at Trump's agenda. The whole media is still telling us that Trump never condemned white nationalism. He winked and nodded at white nationalism, because he said they were very fine people. He wasn't talking about the white nationalists. He condemned the white nationalists. He was talking about the protesters who were for and the protesters who were against the actual statue, not about the crazy violent people at that rally. It's insane to me that this is how this is still covered. I think it's really important to hear that and hear, this press conference that he had in August of 2017, right? He says there's a group on one side that was bad and there's a group on the other side that was also violent. So he's acknowledging that there were, in fact, violent factions on both sides, which, again, gets that both sidesism, right? You're equating white nationalists with people who are literally fighting Nazis, right?
Are you putting what you're calling the alt-left and white supremacists on the same moral plane?
I'm not putting anybody on a moral plane. What I'm saying is this. You had a group on one side and you had a group on the other, and they came at each other with clubs, and it was vicious, and it was horrible, and it was a horrible thing to watch. I think there's blame on both sides. You look at both sides. I think there's blame on both sides, and I have no doubt about it, and you don't have any doubt about it either.
He says it again. I've condemned neo-Nazis.
Go ahead.
Do you think that what you call the alt-left is the same as neo-Nazis?
All of those people, excuse me, I've condemned neo-Nazis. I've condemned many different groups, but not all of those people were neo-Nazis, believe me. Not all of those people were white supremacists by any stretch. Those people were also there because they wanted to protest the taking down of a statue, Robert E. Lee.
He says, I've condemned neo-Nazis. So he's saying out loud in the press conference, I've condemned them. And not all of the people who are, wanting this Confederate statue to remain are neo-Nazis.
But many of those people were there to protest the taking down of the statue of Robert E. Lee. But they were there to protest, excuse me, you take a look the night before, they were there to protest the taking down of the statue of Robert E. Lee.
And then he says, this week, it's Robert E. Lee. Who is it going to be next week? Is it going to be Washington? Is it going to be Jefferson? They were slave owners. And, let's be honest, that's what's happening now in 2020, right? We have statues of Washington coming down, statues of Jefferson coming down, getting graffitied, people writing 1619 all over them, saying, slave owner. So Trump was right, unfortunately.
This week it's Robert E. Lee. I noticed that Stonewall Jackson's coming down. I wonder, is it George Washington next week? And is it Thomas Jefferson the week after? You really do have to ask yourself, where does it stop?
He's asked, should the statue stay up? And he says that should be up to the local community. That should be up to a local committee, right? That it should go through some kind of democratic process to decide whether or not that statue stays up or comes down. I agree with that. Yay!
Should statues of Robert E. Lee stay up? I would say that's up to a local town, community, or the federal government, depending on where it is located.
There should be an actual debate about it, not just let's tear down the statue by a mob in the middle of the night, right? Which is still going on in 2020. So good job, all you morons who thought it wouldn't happen. Then he says there's blame on both sides. And then here's the very well-quoted piece of this whole press conference is that he says there are very fine people on both sides. Then you get everyone saying, he's saying that there's a moral equivalence to white national neo-Nazis, to the anti-fascists who are literally trying to literally, trying to, fight their oppressors.
And you had some very bad people in that group. But you also had people that were very fine people on both sides. You had people in that group, excuse me, I saw the same pictures as you did. You had people in that group that were there to protest the taking down of, to them, a very, very important statue and the renaming of a park from Robert E. Lee to another name.
And then here we go, 19 minutes into this press conference, he says, quote, "I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white nationalists. They should be condemned totally."
So you know what? It's fine. You're changing history, you're changing culture, and you had people, and I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white nationalists, because they should be condemned totally. But you had many people in that group other than neo-Nazis and white nationalists, okay? And the press has treated them absolutely unfairly. Now, in the other group also, you had some fine people, but you also had troublemakers, and you see them come with the black outfits and with the helmets and with the baseball bats. You had a lot of bad people in the other group. There were people in that rally, and I looked the night before. If you look, they were people protesting very quietly the taking down of the statue of Robert E. Lee. I'm sure in that group there were some bad ones. The following day, it looked like they had some rough, bad people, neo-Nazis, white nationalists, whatever you want to call them. But you had a lot of people in that group that were there to innocently protest and very legally protest because, I don't know if you know, they had a permit. The other group didn't have a permit. So I only tell you this. There are two sides to a story. I thought what took place was a horrible moment for our country, a horrible moment.
It's disheartening to me to find this out now because I feel like I have been misled, right? Like, oh, he's dog whistling to the alt-right. You hear that all the time. I heard that all the time. Like, who is this racist blank hole? Who is this like neo-Nazi in the White House? Beyond my frustration, I'm very glad to hear that he would say, I am condemning neo-Nazis. Like, yes, garbage human beings. Please fall off the face of the earth. It's fascinating to me to see kind of how this ideology has come about, that supposedly Trump never condemned white nationalists. I don't understand how that happened. And it's simply not true.
And I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white nationalists because they should be condemned totally.
And honestly, this lie is pernicious and it's lasting to now, to 2020. This is what Joe Biden launched his campaign on, right? His whole launch for running for president was about how Donald Trump said that there are very fine people on both sides, and that's when he knew we had to fight for the soul of our country.
He said there were, quote, some very fine people on both sides. Very fine people on both sides? With those words, the President of the United States assigned a moral equivalence between those spreading hate and those with the courage to stand against it.
I don't think Donald Trump is dog whistling to white nationalists or neo-Nazis when he says they should be condemned totally. He's saying, up yours, F you, I condemn you. I don't see how he's dog whistling to them. I think this was one of the biggest misconceptions I personally had about Donald Trump, that he was dog whistling to the right, that he wasn't condemning white nationalists, but he literally says it. So it makes me very frustrated that we're not told the whole story about him, because sometimes I feel like I disliked this man for many years for reasons that aren't true, for things that he never did. But, that's okay now, because we're all going to be on the same page and understand the man literally condemned white nationalists and neo-Nazis. Yay, okay? That's like the bare minimum that you should be able to do. So, there you go. Just a bizarro world for how many journalists continue to run with this idea that there are very fine people on both sides. Just to smear him, just because orange man bad. hopefully at least it gives you a little bit of hope knowing that he said, I condemn white nationalists and neo-Nazis completely, right? They should be condemned totally. Hooray.